We love our stories in Ireland. Any decent conversation usually begins with a story. So I'm going to begin this talk with a story too. And this is one I've come across in a number of different cultural settings. But today I'm going to place it in the realm of Irish mythology, as I believe it's relevant to my message. And the story goes, once there was a warrior called Conan. And Conan had been sent on a mission into the wild and unfamiliar territory of the land of Down. And his mission was to collect a chest full of wonderful jewels, gold, silver, rubies, and the like. And as soon as this chest was full, he was to return with it immediately back home to his king in Ireland. And so Conan went about his duty, and he gathered and collected these treasures, and eventually he filled the chest. And believe it or not, a chest full of treasure can be a surprisingly heavy thing. So Conan now needed to find some help to carry it home. And he knew he needed to find not just brave and strong individuals, but people who were happy and content within themselves, because this was going to be a particularly long and hard journey back home to his king in Ireland. And so Conan went about his duty, and these people happily assumed their roles, and off they went singing their songs. And these were a happy people, a group of people from a local tribe. And every day they went and they ate, and off they went about their roles. And the second day they ate, and off they went about their journey. The third morning, the fourth morning, the fifth morning, the same. And by now these group of people had left their own tribal land and had entered into new lands that were geologically different, where the vegetation was different, where the topography was different, where even the animals were different. But these people were still singing their songs, and their ancestors were coming with them because their ancestors were in their songs. And after 2.5 moons, they had made great progress. But then one morning, having eaten, they didn't happily assume their roles. Instead, they seemed to sink into some kind of a tremendous trance state within themselves. And Conan began to get impatient, and finally he got angry and he pulled out his sword. But this made no impression whatsoever on these people, as they had fallen deep into this trance state. And so eventually Conan rised up and he sat down beside an elder from the group whose name was Ogma. And he candidly said, "Ogma, look, what's going on? We were making such great progress. Now what's happening?" And it took a long, long, long time for Ogma to come into a sense of his own hands, his own feet, his own identity. But finally, he did emerge into a sense of who he was. And he turned to Conan and he said, "We have moved so far, so fast during these last 2.5 moons that we must now sit down and wait for our souls to catch up." And I guess in a sense, that might be what we're just doing here today in Berkeley. Each one of us here has traveled great distances in our own lives, physically, culturally, intellectually. And it's only at events such as this one that we get an opportunity to sit down and reflect, and maybe, just maybe, connect with that deeper part of ourselves, that part which allows us to distinguish what's really important. It took me 30 years to figure out one thing that was very important to me. I grew up in Connemara in the west of Ireland. Gaelic, or as we call it, Irish, is my native language. I like to think of Irish as my soul's language. There's no denying that the Gaelic language today is an endangered tongue, with just approximately 2% of the population who speak it on a daily basis, and given the relative absence of an economic need for it in this global commercial world, Some academics have stated that barring exceptional measure, Gaelic as a community language may not survive beyond the next 2 generations. And this is something that saddens me, and I've been thinking about this. And in my thinking of the potential loss of this language, I've thought about how my relationship with it has changed over the years. You see, as a teenager, this language sometimes caused me a good deal of shame amongst my non-Gaelic speaking friends. At times, it made me feel different and weird. To give you an example, if my parents would call me, most of the time I would only answer them like in monosyllabic words, like yeah and no. And if it was absolutely necessary to engage in conversation, at times I'd whisper like this out of the side of my mouth. So none of my peers would hear me speak. Today I think of how crazy that was. Here was my teenage self in the west of Ireland, ashamed to speak his own native Irish language. I guess you could say the displacement of indigenous culture that had been going on under colonial rule for centuries has taken its toll on the Irish psyche. But that isn't what I want to focus on today. Sometimes in life, you have to leave home to come home. Living in another country affords you the opportunity to take a step back and look at your own cultural inheritance from a new perspective. I experienced what it was like to live in a community without this language, its songs and stories, and in doing so, I realized that this ancient tongue is a real gift that's been passed on to me. You see, for me personally, Irish allows me to see the world through somewhat of a different lens. It allows my imagination to flourish, and it has this extraordinary capacity to make things that could sometimes be otherwise dull and bland, graceful and personal. To give you an example, the Irish word for a wolf is mach tíde, which means the son of the land. The Irish word for a ladybug is Boin Day, which means God's little cow. And growing up in Connemara, you'd be greeted each morning by the Atlantic Ocean, and on looking out on a choppy, rough sea, we might say, Tá blá bán gáirí an iascaire. The fisherman's garden is under white flower. This language connects me with my landscape and environment in a way that transcends that which is visual and obvious, and it allows me to set foot into what the Irish writer John O'Donoghue called the invisible world. 2 Decembers ago, I was back home in Ireland, and my dad and I were chatting about the state of the language, as we often do. And as this conversation was coming to a close and the flow was finding its own natural end, I asked him one last question. What would be the real tragedy of losing this language? Beyond communication, beyond politics. And just like the elder Agma in the story, it took him a while to answer, but finally he did. And he said the real tragedy of losing this language would be bás na háilleachta, the death of beauty, pure and simple. And as soon as he said it, it made sense to me, and a song came to my mind, and this song epitomized the beauty he spoke of. And the song is called Cuine na Drí Muire, the Lament of the Three Marys. And it's a song about the crucifixion. But the song focuses on the humanity of this story, a desperate mother looking for her son. And so within this song, we go on a journey with Mary. And in the first verse, she asks Peter the apostle, "Have you seen my true love?" And Peter responds, "Oh, I saw him earlier being beaten by the guard." In another verse, she sees a young man on the cross, and she asks a woman in the crowd, "Who's that fine man on the cross?" The woman responds, "Mary, do you not recognize your own son?" And finally, in the last verse, she makes her way to his body and she sees the blunt nails and spear that have pierced through him, killing him. Now, this is about as graphic and harrowing of a retelling of this experience gets, and yet somehow, when I first heard a sean-nós singer called Joe Heaney sing this song, I realized something. And that was that I had never heard grief sound so beautiful. Now, growing up not particularly used to singing in public, I heard a little bit of advice. Never volunteer to sing a song. Always wait until you've been asked. And then kindly decline upon first request. Now, usually, what will happen is the person or the people who are asking you, they'll ask you again, this time with a lot more encouragement. And this is when it's really important. This is when it's really important you stick to your plan. You kindly decline once more. And you're almost guaranteed to be met with a third and final request with a lot of encouragement. This is when you say yes. And the beauty about saying yes at this stage is that you can sing any which way out of tune, and so long as you sing from your heart, everyone is just delighted with the fact that they got you to sing in the first place. So with that in mind, we'll all pretend here now that I've been asked 3 times, and I'll sing you those verses from that song, Cuine na Drí Muire. Ha fadé raspol an vakatu mograban ho 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 an so no Honig mer balle ha Jesu gangarda ho 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 ha go so no Ngus ke an farbrashin chron na pashe oh ho ho hang so no oh nei nach nani to akawari oh ho ho ha go so no go son kodu tarni mela Krina khasang go slava oh ho ho hang so no Ngusakudu antla Krina vra Allah calling oh ho ho hang ho so no Thank you. And so it's because of these transfigurative properties in this language that make magic of the seemingly banal and that expose the light in the thick of darkness, that in January 2018 I decided to start an initiative called Celtic Consciousness. The focus of this initiative is to share the beauty enshrined in the Irish language with a wider audience, to create experiences like our tour in Ireland that use the songs and stories of this ancient tongue as a medium to connect with that deeper part of yourself. I suppose you could say we kind of create a comfortable space for you to sit down while your soul catches up. And so with that now, I'll bring this talk to a close. But before I go, I'll leave you all with the question. And that question is there a language within you that isn't being shared, that isn't being claimed, and most importantly, that isn't being celebrated? Gur míle, míle maith agaibh. Thank you all very, very much.